Well, good day there, Mr. Tassin. How are you this wonderful day?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. I'm getting used to the new Canadian flag. What do you think of that? Ooh-ha.
I think as you said, pre-production, I'm kind of wondering, we got all the people that are so bent out of shape about us becoming the 51st state, but they seem to be right on board with us becoming the 28th member of the European Union, whatever they want to call it, you know. And the fact that we are close to the United States with a border than we are with anywhere in Europe, I guess that just goes down to me to be a great poser,
Yes.
Ratcher,
I'm,
conundrum.
this is a special edition of the Border Patrol Journal because this isn't
Oh,
your episode 20. We'll do that another day. This is a news alert like
a
they
flat.
do on, yeah, news alert, news alert. All
And I guess
kidding aside.
that gets down to a point of I don't know how many other Canadians have seen what's gone on in the last 24 hours and are on a slow burn, on a huge burn, on a should I draw a warm bath and get a blunt razor blade? I don't know. But I think that if there is upset as what I am and what I think you are, we have a lot of reasons for concern over the next 24 to 48 hours. I can't figure out how Carney, our supposed prime minister of a country, is trying to sell us down the river when he spent the election campaign trying to stop us from being sold down the river to our great neighbors to the south, the United States. We will never be sold. We will never be the 51st state. We only drink maple syrup and wrap ourselves in a Canadian flag. And here we are, a few months after that great con job, being told that we're more European than the Europeans, and that's why we should belong to the European Union, without really knowing at all what it has to offer. It has no idea how much sovereignty we're going to give up. Uh, we have supposedly just signed some kind of a memorandum that we're going to have great trade relations and great security relations, and all to the behold of an organization that is not even a country. It blows my mind.
It
And I,
uh, and it's going at a speed. At a
yeah,
speed it's like warp speed that no one I think grasps. And frankly, the crackpots and dimwits who you see on Facebook, as you were saying in pre-production, who think this is a great idea are out of their minds. Like this is the dumbest thing and the most undemocratic move that's ever been done by any prime minister in this country's history. I mean,
well,
this is absurd.
that it is, and I just don't understand where uh, his authority is coming from to sign an agreement that has not been debated in Parliament. And I guess it just goes with, I'm going to run this like I run most of my companies as a CEO. I'm just going to do things. Uh, I'm sorry, but there is a parliamentary process. What authority do you have to go over and sign any agreement that has not been debated in the House of Commons?
I don't know.
Where's your authority to sign something on this? Where do your loyalties lie? Because obviously they're not with Canada right now.
Well,
I'm sorry.
where is he going to get the 250 some billion dollars that he's going to put into this SAFE program, the rearming of Europe? Like, why are we rearm? It's not our job to rearm Europe. Like, when did this start? Listen,
We have an obligation to rearm our own forces right
what
now.
forces? We couldn't, we can't, we're flying
Well,
antiques. We
I
have
know,
we have a
and
navy that is not even a blue water navy anymore. We have a listen, I read this morning, this whole thing about the EU relationship, this pact he's signing with that woman who's an unelected bureaucrat running the European Union, the Commission. It's just it got me so mad that I had to call you and say we need to vent because this makes no sense. It
It
makes no
is.
sense because it was never part of the discussion during the election that we're going to get into a relationship with a body known as the European Union, which is fairly closely aligned with the World Economic Forum, the whole Davos crowd, the WHO, the entire European Union ethos is about open borders, about globalist approaches to everything, the destruction of sovereignty of its own members, which is why the United Kingdom got the hell out of that outfit, 5, 6 years ago, because it was clear that their laws, their traditions, their culture, whatever, was being totally usurped by this Brussels/Strasbourg crowd, right?
And I guess that, like we said, pre-production, are we prepared to have our borders thrown wide open to anybody from Europe? I mean, look what happened in Germany. Look what happened in France. They have millions of undocumented arrivals. If we become part of this great organization, are we now opening our own borders up to that? And what you think we have a bad relationship now with the United States? That
Well,
is just going to compound it.
oh yeah, I mean, I
Exponentially.
know they're having the NATO meeting today and tomorrow. I would love to be a fly on the wall if this discussion bilaterally comes up between the president and the prime minister.
And
Like, what
we,
are you doing? Would be if I was Trump, I'd say to Carney, like, what are you doing? Like, what the hell are you doing?
well,
Uh,
it gets down to we're talking again apples and oranges. We're going to be part of the European Union, which is an organization. It's not a country. And now we're having a meeting with NATO, which is an organization run by countries. You know, as far as I know, the European Union doesn't have a standing armed forces of anything. Airplanes,
there's no
soldiers,
European Union
navy.
army. No, no.
Yeah.
There's 27 countries that contribute to this melange of military protection of the continent of Europe, but it now tries to compete with NATO itself. So now
Yeah.
you've got NATO, which with the exception of Canada and the United States, two founding members of the original NATO 14, now is 32, mostly European Union countries. Now they want to start up yet another military alliance, which is parallel practically with NATO. And for all those dimwits in Canada who don't know history, every time Europe rearms itself, it follows on there's a war. When Europe rearmed itself after the Napoleonic Wars leading to 1914, guess what happened? First World War. Then 20 years later, after they, slaughtered a couple million people, they decided to start it all over again. They rearmed itself. One of the chief protagonists was a German with a little mustache, okay, who was going to do a big European Union kind of program, except everyone's going to speak German, and it was done. That was the plan. And ironically, we now have another German who is in charge of the European Union. There's a woman who wants to rearm Europe, sucking in the Canadian dimwits on this thing, and to suggest that then and what the enemy is now Russia once again. Okay, in the First World War, we had to go after Russia, didn't work. Second World War, Russia was the ally knocking off the Nazis in the war, and now we're starting it all over again. Like, I'm sorry that you don't want to be a conspiracy guy, but these things have kinetic problems later on. And
Yeah.
it, and speaking of kinetic things, we signed a pact like this. It's like not to put too much of a tinfoil hat on, but the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was just like that when the Germans and the Russians signed. Okay, we're not going to attack each other. Yeah, okay, and then 2 years later they're blowing each other up and dividing up Poland. At the
Well,
Vistula River. These
it's
people don't even know their history, and they're dabbling along with this clown. Sorry, why are we getting involved with the European Union? North America has nothing to do with the European Union. Okay.
no.
And our historical approach has been peacemaking, not warmongering. And that's all you're getting right now out of Brussels and London and Paris is we got to go kill Russians because this whole Ukraine Russia thing, which is a proxy war, by the way, as we all know, between the American industrial complex, which provides most of the weaponry and the money. Okay. And so far, it's a never-ending war. They keep talking about stopping never-ending wars. Well, they got one on their own doorstep that they just keep shoveling money into.
And I think too that this, I don't know why our leader, I don't want to call him prime minister, our supposed leader, is trying to antagonize President Trump even more. Like, I mean, this is almost like in the old days where you took off your glove and slapped a face and we're going to have a duel at dawn. I mean, it just does not make sense. Whether you like the Americans, whether you don't like the Americans, whether you plan to visit the United States or you don't plan to visit the United States, they're our neighbor.
And they're not moving, and we can't ship out of here.
And I would love to have that on a more friendly terms than on a very antagonistic terms. And the way our current leadership is going, it's driving a bigger and bigger wedge into that relationship that we had with the United States. And it is not going to end well.
I see a darker scenario here, Bob. I think the whole movement in the West of separatism is just going to be fueled by this crazy stuff. Because if you're concerned about Canada, why are you heading off to Brussels and making deals with people 3,000 miles away? You can't make deals with your own provinces properly. Okay.
Well, because that one particular province in specific terms has that dirty thing called fossil fuels, and they're bad.
Well,
like the United States was bad at the time of the whole election thing. And we've talked about this before, and I'll say it again. The whole thing on separatism in Canada has been boiled over, bent, shaped, fixed, because we're thinking along the terms of Quebec separatism. And Quebec uses separatism as a leverage to gain more power or more money or more something. Now, again, the Quebec people might take issue with that. But the bottom line is that 9 times out of 10, there's always an agreement signed where there will be
there's always a carve out.
There will be something here. We'll protect that. We'll do this.
There's always a carve out for Quebec. They didn't even sign the charter.
That's right. And the problem with Alberta, Saskatchewan in particular is they're not after the money. They're after protecting their money.
That's right. Big difference.
That's
not extorting money. It's I'm not sending any more money. Very basic stuff.
Yeah. So, that has to be taken care of, and why leader Carney, because I think that probably is a very
dear leader.
It comes out in 1984 or something. Napoleon.
Look, let's be honest. The guy's a Marxist. WEF.
Well, it's certainly becoming that evident that we've got a parliament that hasn't sat for any more than 30 days this year.
20 days.
Lucky.
20 days.
If we're lucky, when they come back in the fall, they might be able to squeeze 70 days out of 365. And when we need money, he just sends a special bill to the governor general, who willy-nilly signs this without any second thought, any second sober thought, without thinking that this is all budgetary items. We're spending money that we don't have because there has been no budget put forward. There's just so many things wrong on so many levels with this that
we're heading to $1 trillion deficit. How in the hell are we going to deal with that?
How can anybody in this country who has a brain think that this is a good thing and it's going to end up well?
Well, we spoke some time ago about the Manchurian Candidate, and I think we were looking at the wrong Manchurian Candidate. We thought he was a Manchurian Candidate for Trump's gang. We're wrong. This guy is a Manchurian Candidate for the WEF Davos crowd that hides behind the whole EU thing. And now, if you look at the kinetic implications, you piss off the Americans, who are not going to trust you as far as you can be thrown.
Don't already trust us.
Okay. Uh, then you have a nascent separatist movement, which I think is going organic in Western Canada. I mean, you just have to look at some of the rhetoric that crosses the social media, and these people are full-throated on this. They've had enough of the double crosses and the negativity that comes out of Eastern Canada that looks down their noses at people
Well,
west
and
of Thunder
that's
Bay.
let's say not Eastern Canada. Let's be more specific. The Laurentide crowd, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto.
Triangle, absolutely. And to go back to your analogy or your reference to Quebec, curiously, a goodly portion of the people who are running this thing federally are from Quebec. So you've got all your men on all the squares here, which
Hmm.
is what which is has been the Achilles heel of the Federation since 1867.
Hmm.
They've had two referendums. Each time they get more and more power, yet they still have, you have a separatist opposition party in parliament, for heaven's sakes. Which in any other country you go, this is not normal. All
Hmm.
right. So
Well, you remember the days when we had the election? It was shortly after Mulroney got his chin handed to him on a platter, and his Her Majesty's loyal opposition at the time was a separatist party.
Party Québécois, that's right. So, look, we've got to deal with this. And like I said, we had to do a quick podcast today because this is not good. God, for last 48 hours, everyone's been focused on the Iraq Israel conflict and all the cosplaying that's been going on there with the ceasefire, no ceasefire, bombing, yes, bombing. Like the whole thing is getting to be like a giant play with strange sort of impacts. You would have thought that the price of oil would have gone through the ceiling on this. Nothing's happened in particular because I think the real players know this is all BS. All they want to do was get rid of Iran's ability to make a bomb, which I suspect they probably did just fine. Took out their ballistic missiles. Then you had this whole play about retaliation, and they apparently made a phone call to Qatar. We're going to send some missiles over there, so make sure everyone gets the hell out of the bases, and nothing actually happened. Then you have the president losing his temper and actually saying he's
The F bomb.
he drops the F bomb on these two belligerents. In the meantime, our guy in the background is pulling this stunt off,
Hmm.
which most people probably aren't watching, or the naive and the gullible in Canada, as you said earlier on Facebook and others. Oh, this is such a great idea. Give me a break. They haven't a clue what this means. The kinetic
Your
reality is
sovereignty is yeah,
if you
your
sign a
sovereignty.
deal with the EU, there are other things that start happening which you had no idea was going to happen. This is not just a simple, we're going to sign a trade agreement. This goes way beyond a trade agreement, and nobody gave this guy the authority to do that. And you've got 35 million Canadians, because I subtract the 5 million that probably shouldn't even be here because they don't care, right? Who are sitting around with their fingers up their keister. Oh, wow. Look, this guy's the adult in the room. He's gone over, he's talked to the big guys. Yeah, he's talking to a bunch of warmongers over there who are trying to start the Third World War. Uh, I just don't get it. I'm no peacenik, but this is crazy stuff that we're getting involved in. And if it's all about pissing off Washington, they're doing a hell of a good job.
Yeah,
And if you want to push separatism based on a whole other set of issues, like you're focusing on something that we never asked you to focus on, and you're spending our money on stuff we never asked you to spend your money on, well, maybe we'd be better off not being in this club. So forget being a member of the EU because your own membership over here, called Confederation, is going to fall apart because you're not paying
it has
attention to
already.
what is going on here. Okay, you're paying attention to what's going on over there. And then when
Yeah,
you have, even your neck of the woods, you have that clown who runs your province who decides he's part of Team Canada, and then has contracts to build the ferries in China with Chinese steel and Chinese workers. But he's Team Canada. We're going to sit together and do Canadian steel. Come on, give me a break. how stupid do they think schmucks like us are, for God's sakes? I mean, this is really stupid now. Or they must
Well,
think we really
it
are
goes back,
stupid.
it goes back to that old question that I keep on asking.
I know.
Is it a real question or is it a challenge? And I'm afraid it's becoming a challenge.
Well, I just see one thing after another that I'm connecting some dots here. Carney is a European. He's got two passports that proves he's a European. Okay. Krista Freeland is a Ukrainian. You know why she's trying to get this Ukrainian thing keep going, sending the Ukrainians money. It's another $2 billion being shipped over there in four with the loan guarantees. That's right. Like we know, it's we're like an ATM for that shyster from Kiev. This is just ridiculous. Not my war, not my country, not my problem. I've said this over and over again. Okay. I don't like Russians any more than I like Ukrainians in this situation, but this has to stop. Okay. And I don't care whether Krista Freeland has Ukrainian lineage and we're going to screw around with the rest of this country.
Yeah,
This is
right.
nonsense.
It is. And, I think it's time for people, whether you're a liberal, whether you're a conservative, whether you're an NDP, whether you're a Bloc Québécois, it's time for you to sit back and look at this realistically. Right
Wake
now,
up.
we have a dear leader, to quote from 1984, who is doing things that really I don't think there is a mandate for. He might have been elected. He might have a slate majority in the House of Commons, but it doesn't give him the right to go and start doing things unilaterally. Uh,
This
you know,
fundamentally changes our foreign policy, our domestic policy, our trade policy, our
Mhm.
it
And again,
turns
yeah,
it turns
it,
our institutions upside down because when you sign on to this deal, you're going to have to meet certain requirements of the
and
European
again, yeah,
Union.
to our dear friends in Quebec, you better start looking at this because your dairy industry that is being protected right now, it won't be protected in the future if this thing goes through.
Yeah, and I think that if you and this is a risk that this guy is taking because if he's intending on pissing off the Americans, he's doing a good job, I think. And then, commensurate with that is if they detect a rising sentiment, particularly in the West, that we're done with this thing. All they have to do is offer some kind of sweetener to Western Canada vis-a-vis the U.S. And this thing goes south right away
Well, it's
in
it's
all
not even
sorts of
a
ways.
matter of the U.S. saying you can be the 51st state. It's a matter of the people in Washington saying, if a referendum were held and Alberta and Saskatchewan thought that they would be better off independent, we would recognize them as an independent state or
Precisely.
an organization or whatever.
And that would be the
Nothing at
kiss
all
of
to
death
do
to
with whether they
Quebec.
become a U.S. territory or federation or
Yep,
whatever it
that's
is.
right.
They've recognized. And internationally, uh, that's that's
Yeah,
sterling silver. That's 14 karat, 20, 22 karat gold. That is
sure. It's
it's a
the
done deal.
self-determination argument that was made in Slovakia when they decided they didn't want to be part of the Czechoslovakia. Okay, the boom. They left. They're a separate country. Okay.
Mhm,
Now, granted, they're part of the EU like the Czechs are, but the point is that was done. Uh,
mhm.
and the history shows this happens a lot of times. This is not regime change. This is basically watching something organically develop, and then you have someone who's basically fertilizing that organic development with this kind of nonsense. Anyway, we've raised the alarm, and we'll talk about it in a future
Yeah, it is
discussion. Right now,
time for Canadians to wake up and smell the coffee,
yeah, that's right. Even if it's roasted in Canada
or not.
or not. Anyway, uh, that's it. This was just a news alert from us. We're the head of the NATO meetings in Brussels today and tomorrow. At the end of the week, we'll be back with our regular.
Well, that's great. And again, we got to sit back and think the duplicity of an EU making deals, and now we're going to be sitting down with the actual organization that deals with security. Like
That's right. I don't know why we're happy to help a parallel military body grow in the face of NATO. I mean, NATO already is a problematic organization that exists simply to, I think, figure out ways to take over Russia because it sure as hell isn't there to defend anybody. It's become an offensive group. And this is not what we signed up for when the Warsaw Pact was around. That was a legitimate deal with NATO, but it looks like the warmongers are getting their way at the moment. So it's
Yeah. And
uh,
again, to our Canadian listeners, just go out and tell me the next time you see an EU armed forces member.
yeah, well, he's probably dressed up in one of these things, you know.
Yeah, yeah, with a bunch of stars on it. No
All
bars,
all
stars.
stars, no bars. Exactly. All right, gotta go. I'll see you on Friday, or whatever. I guess we'll see what happens with the meeting, and I'm sure we'll have something to say about it, right?
Might be a little later on than that. We've got a little road trip planned.
Oh,
So
yes, of course. Well, for don't forget to hit the like
yeah,
button, subscribe, buy us a coffee if
please,
you
please,
can.
please, please, please.
Yeah.
If we're way off base here, folks,
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah.
I don't.
You
I
can
certainly
always
don't
see
want
our
to put on a.
comments. Thanks.
I don't want to put on a tinfoil hat for no particular reason.
Yeah, but like you said, we'll have to figure out shiny side out or shiny side in.
Uh, well, again, comments.
All right.
Have
Take
fun.
care, Bob. See you soon.
Bye.